to do that job for us today. Brothers and sisters, to speak on Islam, the misunderstood religion, to be followed by an open question and answer session, may I present before you Dr. Abu Amina Bilal Phillips.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last messenger of Allah. As my brother Muhammad Naik introduced the topic, Islam, the misunderstood religion, in fact, it was the topic which was the title of a book written by Muhammad Qutb, which influenced me to become a Muslim some 20 odd years ago. At that time, the book addressed not necessarily the same topics that I will be addressing, but it served the same purpose in terms of clarification of common misunderstandings with regards to Islam. From mostly a political perspective, because at the time when I accepted Islam, I was a communist after having left Christianity for communism. So it clarified for me from a political perspective why Islam was the most effective system, or had with it the best principles for the running of human society and for the protection of the rights of individuals and creatures on the earth. My talk is focused more from a general misunderstanding held around the world with regards to Islam. And that misunderstanding could be traced back to two major sources. If we assume that the world media, for the most part, originates in the West. When we look at the various news reports, it's by AP, Associated Press, Reuters, all these press agencies, the vast majority of them are Western-based. And as such, they influence the media all over the world today. We have to understand that the misconceptions which are prevalent in the media today are a result of either one or another factors, of two factors. The one, or the first, would be that of deliberate misinformation. And that is a product of the Crusaders' period in which they encountered Muslims. This is where Christianity in Europe encountered Islam under the heading of the Crusades, where they sought to liberate, as they saw it, the Holy Land from the Muslim infidels. In order to generate support for this crusade, there were large amounts of false information disseminated about Islam in order to encourage these people to go and fight, give up their lives to occupy this particular land. Of course, historians since then, have pointed out that the reasons behind it were, to a large degree, economic and not religious at all. It had to do with the trade which was coming from the Far East, trade in spices, trade in silk, etc., that the Muslims were the middlemen, and they wanted to remove the middlemen. But it was given this overtone of religious struggle in order to motivate the masses to support this crusade. And we could say today's misinformation, deliberate misinformation, is a part of that. It's an extension of it, or we could say it is a hangover from the period of the Crusaders. What came out of that period, during the period of colonial expansion over the Muslim world, as well as the rest of the world, is a tradition of study known as Orientalism in the West. Orientalism meaning they specialized in Eastern things, Eastern religions, etc. It included others, but focused to a large degree on Islam because they represented the largest group. And it was missionary based. It was, there were systems of study set up in order to penetrate the areas under Muslim control, to penetrate these areas psychologically, intellectually. So they made a study of Islamic texts, etc., to try to find opportunities or avenues by which they could confuse the people, create doubts in the peoples about their religion in order to support their own political control over those given areas. As a result, the Orientalist tradition is filled with many lies, things which are outright lies about Islam. Unfortunately, the approach was not one of discussion and debate, where you sit down and present what your beliefs are, and I will present what my beliefs are, but it was an attack. And as such, unfortunately, that attack was an unscrupulous attack in which they sought to malign Islam in any way, shape, or form possible. So many lies, many things are attributed to Islam, which even the smallest child, if you ask the child, is this a part of Islam? They will tell you, no, it has nothing to do with Islam. Islam doesn't say this. The smallest child can give the correct answer. So we cannot excuse, scholars, PhDs, of Europe, etc., who studied Islamic texts. They learned Arabic to the point where they've understood the Quran, they understood Islamic texts, books of fiqh, etc., that they're going to make fundamental mistakes on very basic things which each and every Muslim knows. This represents the deliberate element in misinformation. Now, there is another element of misinformation which I call the inadvertent element. And that is due to misinterpretations, where people observe Muslims doing something, and then they judge it according to their own cultural or social or religious backgrounds. They interpret it from that point of view. Just as a simple interpretation, for example, if Muslims are seen to bow towards the Kaaba in India, for example, then Hindus who bow to their idols will look at this and try to interpret it in the same light. Well, Muslims are bowing to the Kaaba as we bow to our idols, This is not necessarily a thing of worship, but it is a means through which God is worshipped. This is how it is interpreted. So they interpret it in that light. Or, for example, Muslims slaughtering of animals. That in Christian tradition, the slaughter was sacrificial for the removal of sin in Christian tradition. So when they look at Muslims slaughtering on Eid al-Adha, they try to interpret it in the same light. That is one legitimate source of misinformation which we cannot blame people for. It is understandable. It's only for us to try as Muslims to clarify to them that it is not as they perceive it. The other source is one of a lack of information, where people don't have information about what Muslims are doing, and they form interpretations or form ideas about Muslims and their practice based on a lack of information. The other aspect of inadvertent misinformation is from the practice of Muslims themselves, where Muslims, in their own ignorance of Islamic teachings, then involve themselves in practices which are incorrect, which are recognized internationally as being incorrect, and as such, people of other ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, then judge Islam based on the practice of Muslims. Again, this we cannot blame others because it is natural for people to judge a religion based on the practice of the people. You know, if it is common practice amongst these people to do this or to do that, then to say this is from the religion is reasonable and logical, though it may not be the case. So in this area, I mean, we Muslims ourselves are to blame for this portion of misinformation. And the best that we can do is to clarify for them that Islam is not what Muslims do, but what Muslims are supposed to do. And then we clarify to them what in fact are the actual teachings of Islam. Now, what I intend to do this morning is just to look at some of the major areas of misinformation or misinterpretation, misunderstanding with regards to Islam. And I will divide them into three basic areas. One of beliefs, one of religious practices, and the third of social practices. Now, with regards to religious beliefs, the central pillar of Islamic belief is in one God, Allah. And it has been perceived by others that this God is a personal God of Muslims. As when we read in the scriptures about Jehovah of the Jews, he is the personal God of the Jews. From an Islamic perspective, of course, this is not the case. Allah is the God of creation. He is the creator, sustainer of the whole universe, all that exists. And he is the same God who is found in all religions. However, the view of that one God, because the vast majorities of religions in the world do believe in one God, irrespective of what their followers may practice. Today, if we search back to the origin of their beliefs, or we sift away the intermediaries, we will find a belief in one God, whether you're in South Africa, whether you're in Korea, whether you're in India here, or any other part of the world. The general belief of all peoples is in one God. The difference from an Islamic perspective, not that that one God is the special God of Muslims, but that one God is unique. Unique. When we speak of the oneness of God, we don't mean oneness in the sense of he is one, this glass of water is one, because this is one glass of water, but there's another glass of water over there. There's no uniqueness in that oneness. When we speak of Allah, God as being one, we're speaking about a unique oneness, meaning that whatever attributes God has, they are unique to himself. That these attributes are not shared by his creation in their completeness, in their perfection. Human beings love, God loves. Human beings see, God sees. But the seeing of human beings is not as God sees. God's seeing is infinite. The past, the present, the future, what is hidden, what is open, whereas human beings are limited to understanding the present with limited information about the past, virtually no information about the future, and what is hidden from them, they cannot perceive. This is human attributes. So from an Islamic perspective, God's attributes are unique. And this is what distinguishes Islam from all of the other religious expressions in the world today. That what is common to all of the other religious expressions is that the attributes of God have been given to his creation in some way, shape, or form. No matter what system you look into, you will find that these attributes have been given either to human beings, where you have God-men or a God-man, or it is to some of the creatures, as may be held in a variety of other religions. Historically, we have found people worshiping either animal figures or imaginary animal figures composed of a variety of animals, maybe with a mixture of human beings, etc., etc. But objects of worship, in general, end up being objects from God's creation. What is usually raised as a question in this regard is, one, what then do Muslims visualize? See, since everybody else who's worshiping God visualizes God, they have images, either of human beings, animals, trees, or whatever. They visualize God through these images. What then do Muslims do? And we have to explain to them, to clarify for them, that we do not visualize God. Because if we strive to visualize God, then we have visualized his creation. Because we can only visualize what we have seen. If I tell you about something you have never seen, having attributes and qualities you have never perceived in any way, shape, or form, then you cannot visualize it. I mean, these are among the things of this world. If I tell you about a fruit in Sumatra, which you have never tasted, I can only tell you it's like a mango, and it looks like a this, and it feels something like a that. But can you actually really perceive of what this is? No, until you taste it, you cannot. This is the nature of human beings. We cannot see, our senses cannot perceive or understand what we haven't experienced. So, for a human being to try to visualize God, and some people say, okay, well, God's a spirit. Then, when people say God is a spirit, something comes to mind. That spirit is some kind of a smoky, hazy kind of a thing. You know, there people still are going to try to put something in their mind of what a spirit looks like. You know? So, in Islamic perspective, we don't even say God is a spirit. We don't say this. The spirits are created. The human spirit is created by God. It's not a part of God in human beings, which again, some people, you know, though they say, yes, God is one, unique and everything else, but there is a piece of God in you and me. You know, that spirit is a part of God. This is a common belief. And of course, once you open that door, so for somebody to say that part of God's spirit is inside you and is inside me, there only remains for somebody to pop up and say, well, guess what? Yes, it's true, God's spirit, part of it is in you and is in me, but God's spirit is more in me than you. Therefore, you should direct your worship towards me, because God's spirit is concentrated in me. You know, you have this kind of philosophies evolving, which encourage people towards the worship of human beings. Whereas, from the Islamic perspective, as I said, you know, God is unique in the purest sense. He does not have the attributes of human beings. When he is worshipped by way of his attributes, by our knowledge of his attributes. We worship him knowing that he is the most merciful. We worship him knowing that he knows whatever we think, whatever we have done. We worship him knowing that he is forgiving, that he has control over all things. Since everything which takes place in the universe is by his permission, then our worship should be directed to him. So this is how we worship God without trying to visualize him in any way, shape, or form. So for us, the Kaaba the direction in which Muslims worship in Mecca is not an object of worship. And it is not an intermediary through which we worship God. Because it is possible to go to Mecca and worship inside of the Kaaba. And nobody who has an idol who he worships to will climb inside of his idol and start worshiping. Because if he does, then he's no longer worshiping his idol. He's somewhere else. He's going outside of the idol. So his worship, those who are involved in worship through idols, they will always have to have that idol visualized in front of them. They work through the idol, either in a picture or in the form of a statue or a human being or whatever. But nobody, it would be considered sacrilegious to go inside of the idol to worship. So from an Islamic perspective, the Kaaba is only a direction of worship. It focuses the direction for the organization of prayer. So people and mosques are lined up in that direction all over the world, which would appear, if one were to rise above the earth, as concentric circles from Mecca over the rest of the earth. So it's only a direction of worship. In fact, the Kaaba was broken down at one point in time. And the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, informed us that in the future, it will be broken down again. As one of the signs of the last day, an individual will come, an Ethiopian will come, and he will smash it. It will be broken down. But worship will not cease. Worship will not cease. We do not have to have a picture of the Kaaba to worship. So it is only for the organization of worship and not an object of worship or an intermediary through which we worship. The other point concerning God in Islam, Allah, is that the term Allah, we do not necessarily hold to be the name of God in the sense that all other names are illegitimate. Allah is an Arabic term. So the Semitic languages, the ancient among them, whether it's Aramaic or Syriac or Amharic, etc., these ancient Semitic languages all refer to God as Allah. But if one finds, as I found when I visited Korea some years back, that the name which the Koreans had for God, Hanonim, which was the name they used before Christianity came there and before even Buddhism arrived there. It referred to God with attributes very similar to the attributes as God is described in Islam. Then we would have to say that obviously the prophet who would have been sent there, because from Islamic beliefs, prophets were sent to all nations and tribes, that the prophet communicating the teachings of Islam to those people would have communicated it in their own language. As Allah said in the Quran that He only sent prophets speaking the language of the people, because the duty of the prophet is to convey. So that quite conceivably is a legitimate name for God. The only thing that we reject is where these names contain other meanings. Those other meanings we reject. But the pure meaning of God being the creator, sustainer of the universe, who is unique in his attributes, this is God, Allah, in whatever language you express it. The other point of misconception, and this arises amongst Christians with regards to Muslims because of that historic struggle known as the Crusades, is that Muslims reject Jesus. And of course, when one goes to the Quran, the basic scripture of Islam, one finds otherwise. In fact, Jesus' name is mentioned more often in the Quran than Muhammad's. May God's peace and blessings be on both of them. It's not to say that Jesus is mentioned more times in the Quran than Muhammad. May God's peace and blessings be upon them. But that by name, Jesus is mentioned more often. In fact, we even have a chapter of the Quran named Maryam, Mary, the mother of Jesus. So it is not true that Muslims reject Jesus, but they reject the concept of Jesus being God. This is what is rejected. The concept of Jesus being God or the Son of God. Son of God, which in Christian theology, in essence, means that Jesus was God. God became man and dwelt among men. This is what is rejected by Muslims. But the virgin birth of Jesus, which today many Christian theologians amongst the Protestants are rejecting. You have many today who question and reject even Jesus' virgin birth. For Muslims, it is a point of belief. If a Muslim denies that Jesus was born from a virgin, he or she who denies it denies Islam, because they're denying the clear text of the Quran. So it is a point of faith for Muslims to believe in the virgin birth of Jesus. However, virgin birth from an Islamic perspective does not elevate Jesus to godhood, does not give him any aspect of divinity, because birth is a quality of creation, not the creator. Because once you're talking about birth, whether it's virgin or otherwise, you're talking about creation. You're no longer talking about God. So virgin birth does not indicate divinity. It's not evidence for divinity. As Allah in the Quran himself states that the example of Jesus is that of Adam. Jesus is like Adam. Allah created them by the command, be, and they were. That is the bottom line. And we look at Jesus' creation by the Virgin Mary as being a completion of the modes by which human beings were created. There are 4 basic modes. Until the birth of Jesus, 3 existed. Human beings created without fathers or mothers. That was Adam. A human being created without a mother. That was Eve. Human beings created with fathers and mothers. That's humankind. And Jesus, a human being created without a father. This is only a completion of the modes of creation. Allah can create us as He wishes. The other misconception concerning Islam in terms of its beliefs is that Muslims are Arabs. Of course, in India, this is not so much of a misconception because Muslims are living right next to the rest of the population, and they realize that these people converted. But for much of the world, Muslims were referred to as Turks at one point in time. And in general today, as a result of media propaganda, Muslims are looked at as Arabs. So many Westerners think that Islam is concentrated in the Arab countries. However, we know that the largest Muslim country today is that of Indonesia, over 200 million Muslims, and they're not Arabs. So, in fact, when you add up the Arabs with regards to the rest of the Muslims, they're only some 20-25% of the totality of Muslims. So, Arab and Islam are not synonymous. And this is something which came also out of the era of the PLO activities, where terrorism was being attributed to Muslims, Arab names were used, Arabs, Islam, it became confused and deliberately confused in many cases, and this impression was given. So when people want to make cartoons, for example, about Muslims, they will use an Arab representative, having a big hooked nose and gutra, as the Saudis wear. Usually this is how they want to depict Muslims. That's the general image that they will depict, a typical Arab from Arabia. With regards to practices, religious practices, one of the common expressions about Islam is that it was spread by the sword. And I know this idea is revived in India to a certain degree by certain elements, to give the impression that people became Muslims by force. However, the realities of India belie that. Muslims ruled India for how many hundreds of years, and the vast majority of Indians are not Muslims. If they were putting people to the sword, unless if they did not accept Islam, then you would not have found a non-Muslim in India. But this was not the case. Muslims ruled Spain for some 700 years also. And the vast majority of Spaniards did not become Muslims. Many did, but the vast majority did not. Where populations became Muslims en masse, this was by the choice of the people. Their lands were administrated by Muslims. In the expansion of Islam from Arabia, but people accepted Islam by choice in the vast majority of cases. I'm not saying that we may not find somewhere, somehow, sometime, an instance in history where somebody forced somebody, but as a teaching of Islam, it is rejected. Allah states very clearly in the second chapter of the Quran, La ikraha fi din, that there is no compulsion in religion. One cannot force anyone. So it is against the fundamental teachings. If somebody did it, they did it in error. The next most common misconception is that Muslims have 4 wives. Polygamy. Especially for myself in the West, whenever people find out you're a Muslim, the first thing they ask you about is this 4 wives. Why 4 wives? This is the biggest issue. First and foremost, we have to clarify for those who have this idea that this is not something which Islam prescribes, meaning that every Muslim must have 4 wives. And actually, you might think, oh, nobody would think that. Yes, when I was in England about 6 months ago, I met one English brother who accepted Islam, and he had told me that he had wanted to accept Islam sometime before, but he loved his wife, you see, as he said. He said, I really love my wife, and I didn't want to marry anybody else. So he held back from accepting Islam, thinking that once he became a Muslim, he had to have 4 wives, right? So again, though it might seem quite funny to us, people have this misconception because Muslims are presented as having 4 wives. Now, what we have to point out for people is that having more than 1 wife is something which Islam did not invent. Islam did not bring polygamy onto the world scene when it did not exist before. Polygamy is a part of the history of mankind. You cannot find a corner of the earth in which the people have not practiced polygamy. And when I say polygamy, actually, the correct term is really polygyny. Because polygamy means having one wife, more than one wife, or more than one husband, right? And really, from an Islamic perspective, it's only having more than one wife. Having more than one husband is called polyandry. And this is something which rarely happened in the history of human beings. The vast majority of cases, 99.99%, wherever you go on the face of the earth, people have been practicing polygamy. Even in the societies, I mean, the basis of Western civilization is Greece and Rome, Greco-Roman culture. And in Greece and Rome, the law was monogamy. It's true, that was the law. But in Greece and Rome, the majority of the population were slaves. The majority of the population were slaves. And the slave master had free access to any of the slave women he wanted. So though he was officially married to one, he was practicing polygamy. So even the so-called monogamy in the so-called monogamous societies, it didn't exist in the past. And it doesn't exist today in the present. In the West, which promotes itself as the upholders of monogamy, what we find in surveys taken in America is that well over 65% of American males have had sexual relations outside of marriage. Married people we're talking about. So what we find is that the majority are practicing polygamy. But it's called extramarital relations. They have another name for it, right? And by calling it extramarital relations, then one is not held responsible. You see, what happens is that women, especially the feminists, the feminist element, they look at polygamy as being the worst thing that could ever happen to women. And so they lead the frontal attack on Islam with this issue of polygamy. Polygamy is the oppression of women. But really, it is monogamy that is the oppression of women. Because monogamy is not in force anywhere. And men make the laws. This is reality. Human society, men have made the laws. We have had a few women pop up here and there. Cleopatra, Indira Gandhi, others around the world, popping up for minutes. But who really ran the show? The men behind them. And men have made the laws. So this monogamy, which is instituted legally by males, is not to the advantage of females. Females think it is, but in fact it is not. Because what it does is it legitimizes polygamy unrestricted and without responsibility. Because a man, in the West, for example, in America or in England, a man may have one wife and 10 mistresses. This is legal. It's not a crime. A wife and 10 mistresses. He has no responsibility to these mistresses, to look after them, to maintain them, all these other things. He doesn't. So he's free to have them at his leisure. It is only pleasure. There's no responsibility involved. So it is in his favor that he is not allowed to have more than one wife. Because that way the other women cannot demand of him anything. Because they're not his wife. Whereas Islam recognizes the nature of human beings. And that is to deal with the way in which Allah has created human society. That human beings, when we look at the populations around the world, women outnumber men, with the exception of China and India, where, unfortunately, there has been systematic genocide against females, right? Whether it is midwives being paid to kill young girls at birth, which has been reported in India on a large scale, or in China, where people are only allowed to have one child and everybody wants a male. The females are aborted or whatever. So a change in demographics have taken place over the last decades. But all of the countries around the rest of the world, there is a surplus of females. A surplus of females resulting, one, from wars. From wars. Wars which are continually happening, which involve death to males. Violent crimes in society. Mostly it is males killing males. Even statistics in terms of births, the number of children that die in the process of birth and in early stages of life, it is concentrated amongst males. And females live longer than males. If you go around the world and you add up all the people who are in their 90s, you will find that some 75 to 80% of them are females. Females live longer than males. Some people say it's due to stress and other things, but it's biological. Allah has created them that way. So Islam provided a means by which the surplus females in the vast majority of the society could be reintegrated in the society through legitimate marriage. Because females, as for the most part, have a desire to have relations with males. This is created in them, as it's created in males to have relationship with females. So either they're going to fulfill it legitimately, or it's going to be fulfilled illegitimately. This is why after World War II, when a huge portion of the male population in Germany was destroyed, German parliamentarians debated introducing polygamy. Unfortunately, the church was against it, strongly opposed to it. So it was never instituted. And what is the result? In Germany today, prostitution is legal. It is a legal profession. People are provided with work cards and medical benefits, everything. It is considered a profession like any other profession, prostitution. Something which is despised over the majority of the world, looked at as being something evil. But there it has become legal. So, what Islam provides is a means of dealing with social problems in society through polygamy, with its restrictions. It is not unrestricted polygamy, where you find, for example, in America you have a group known as the Mormons who used to practice unrestricted polygamy. They have a state called Utah, mostly they're concentrated there, and they used to practice unrestricted polygamy, until around the 30s or so, when the American government put pressure on them, saying that either you cut this out or we'll take away your statehood. Then the leaders of the community, the elders, received revelation, because they believe their elders received revelation from God, that polygamy should now be canceled. So it was canceled. Many of the followers questioned this. It seemed to be too coincidental that the American government was saying, stop it, and all of a sudden you receive revelation to stop it, So they rejected this decision by the elders, and they continue to practice polygamy unrestricted till today. So when I was in the States a couple of years back, they had this individual on TV. They like to have these talk shows, etc. They had one individual, a young man, he's about 26, and he had 36 wives. 26 years old, he has 36 wives, and they were interviewing him about this. But when you look at really what is going on there, is he taking care of these wives, meaning he has the economic means to look after 36 women? No. What he is like the central banker, Everybody is working and they turn their monies into him, and he now redistributes these monies, etc., over the families. I mean, he is not providing for these, really, himself. He's not. Whereas from an Islamic perspective, if a man has another wife, he must provide for her as he provides justly for his first wife. This is an issue of responsibility, and this is why we have to point out to those who raise the specter of polygamy that Islam permits polygamy. But wherever you go in the Muslim world, even in the richest of countries, there is no more than about 15% of Muslim population that practice polygamy. It's always remained a minority because it involves responsibility. I mean, those people who are practicing Islam properly in polygamous circumstances will make that very clear. Though people from the outside tend to think of it, oh, he's got 2 wives, oh, you must be having a good time. The point is that when a man has 1 wife, there comes along with that 1 wife times of misunderstanding, times of stress, difficulty, etc. When a man has 2 wives, that is doubled. So though on one hand, people tend to look at it's double the fun, double the pleasure, one has to look at the other side. There's double the economic responsibilities, double the headaches that come with any marriage, even in single marriage circumstances. It's the reality. And so you'll find even men who have the economic means deciding not to take a second wife because they don't want the hassle, the difficulty, the trouble that comes along with it. 1 is enough. So, we can see from that in the principle of polygamy, Islam takes into account the social, biological needs of human beings. The third main point is that of arranged marriages. This is again, this issue of marriage tends to be focused on. Arranged marriages. Muslims are portrayed in this way, that the women, again, are forced into marriage. Because the biggest element which seems to be attacking Islam is from the feminist side. This is where issues of feminism used to arise. And this issue of arranged marriage, tends to be a big issue. For Western women, it is something abhorrent. And in their context, we can understand it, if one looks at it from their context. Where a woman, when she reaches 17 or 18, she's expected to be out on her own, out of the house, looking after herself, finding a job, taking care of her own business. Parents are no longer responsible for her. They have no claim over her. In fact, many parents will push their kids out. Get out. We've done our job. Now you go take care of yourself. Fend for yourself out there. So a woman who has gone out and fended for herself, looked after herself, taken care of herself, for her parents to then come around and say, we think you should marry so-and-so, this seems to be very illogical. Why? I'm on my own, I'm taking care of my life, etc. I can't choose who's best for me. So from that perspective, when they look in the Muslim world at this idea that marriages are arranged, they see this as some kind of oppression. Of course, whenever one looks at principles outside of their context, we can always get these kind of misunderstandings. Because the idea from the Islamic perspective is not that women are forced to marry certain individuals according to Islamic law. And again, I say according to Islamic law, because unfortunately, in the cultural practices of Muslims in different parts of the world, they do force their daughters to marry. The forcing may not necessarily be putting a gun to their heads, but it may be, if you don't marry this man, I will cut you off from the family. The family will have nothing to do with you anymore. You're on your own, so on, so on, so on, so on. This is psychological forcing. So a woman has to think, she's forced. She has no choice. And of course, from an Islamic perspective, this is abhorrent. The agreement of the daughter should be sought. She should not be obliged to marry anyone she does not want to marry. I know the concept of what is known as love marriages, meaning a woman falls in love with a man and wants to marry. Then the families, cry out, "What is this? Totally unacceptable." But at the same time, these same families are putting their daughters in school along with boys, growing up in classrooms along with boys, and then they're wondering why their daughters are falling in love with these boys. If one puts one's daughter in a circumstance where she could, natural instincts will lead her to falling in love with young men, then they have to be prepared to deal with these consequences. If a daughter comes and says, "I want to marry this person," don't react by saying, "No, you cannot marry because you love this person." No, love is a part of marriage. So if a daughter comes with that, one should instead say, "Okay, let's see this person," because we are, as parents, supposed to help our daughters get married. So we check the person. If the person is suitable from the point of view of religion, he's a religious person, he is from a good family, taking care of his family, is known with a good reputation in the society, etc., then we should encourage that marriage. Not that we encourage love marriage, meaning that people should just go out and date and all these kind of things, but we encourage marriage which is based on Islamic principles and on love. To whatever degree, to the degree meaning why Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "See the people before you marry them," so that there be something in people's heart. That marriage where there is no attraction becomes a bond of slavery. It is not marriage anymore. Love, Allah, when He describes marriage in the Quran, describes it as a means by which He puts mawadda wa rahma, love, compassion between the two. So, from the Islamic perspective, the permission of the daughter must be taken. If she has been previously married, the affair is more in her hands, and the guardian is there to confirm her choice as being the best, or advising her otherwise if he is not. In the case of the unmarried woman who has never been married before, then it is the duty of the family to help her find a husband. To help her find a husband, because the principle is that Islam does not want the women to be going out looking for husbands, having to check out men and these type of things, because they can easily be fooled. So the family takes an active role in the arranging of the marriage, finding somebody suitable, but then the permission of the daughter is to be given, that she says, okay, she's satisfied. So the arranged marriage is only to help in the society because of the fact that marriage is not merely a man and woman getting together, but families. It's a bonding of families. The children are related back to both sides of the families. This is a bonding of families, and the extended family in Islam is highly regarded. The other area, and again this is related to females, is the area concerning divorce in Islam. As Islam is portrayed in the world, that divorce is the right of men, and it's real easy. The man just says, you're divorced, you're divorced, you're divorced, and the woman's divorced. That's it. So easy. Of course, the fact of the matter is quite different. When one goes into Islamic law, that it is not with that kind of simplicity. That in fact, there are conditions. He's not allowed to pronounce divorce if his wife is in her menses. And these conditions have to do with ensuring that the choice or this decision is one based on clear facts, not on emotion purely. Because we know that females, prior to their menses, just in that immediate period prior to it, they have what is known as PMS, where their biological changes affect their psychology. The wife becomes more irritable, easily upset, etc., etc., in those periods. Very common amongst women. So it may lead to misunderstanding, and then divorce is pronounced. So Islam says no. If a woman is in her menses, no. If a woman is in a period between menses in which one has had sexual relations with his wife, then no. Cannot pronounce divorce here also. Islam is saying, well, if you love her enough to have sexual relations with her, you're not ready to divorce her. So it should be in a period in which he doesn't have sexual relations with her. So even after the pronouncement of divorce, the divorce is not automatic. It doesn't take place. It means that the process of divorce begins. And that requires 3 monthly cycles for the woman of menses, or if she doesn't have menses, 3 months before the divorce becomes complete. So, and in which that period, they are supposed to continue to live together. The man is not allowed to send the woman out of her home. It's an opportunity for them to reconcile. So the process is not that easy as it tends to be portrayed in the Western media. Of course, in the end, it still is a pronouncement, a statement. Whereas in the West, in Western media, in Western practices, for a man to get divorced, generally speaking, you have to get into court, you have to get lawyers, you have to, attack your wife or your ex-wife, you have to claim this about her and that about her, and she claims this about you. You have to wash your linen in public. And it's a public attack. And after that, then you can settle down and make some kind of compromise, divide up the properties, etc., etc. So it is a drawn-out process. So relative to Islam, it seems relatively simple because it's only a statement. But for us in Islam, we don't see that as a problem because it is a contract. If people can institute that contract by saying, I do, why that contract cannot end by saying, I don't? I mean, there's nothing, unreasonable and illogical about it. It's a contract. Now, the aspect of it being the right of men, of course, this is not correct. It is primarily the right of men, yes. Men, without any special circumstances, have the right to pronounce divorce in a marriage. Women don't have that right automatically. But if a woman at the time of marriage asks that it be put as a clause in her marriage that she can pronounce divorce as her husband does, he accepts that clause, then it becomes her right. And if at any time during the marriage the wife asks the husband, will you permit me to pronounce divorce? And he says, yes, you have the right, just as I do. Then she can pronounce divorce. And it happened in the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where a man gave his wife permission and she pronounced divorce on him. He came and complained to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, well, you gave her the permission. He ratified it. The other thing is that the woman does have the right to seek divorce automatically through the legal system. That through the courts, she can seek divorce, and that form of divorce is known as khula. This happened in the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course, today, Muslims have made the conditions for khula so difficult, that for a woman to seek divorce through this manner is virtually impossible. This is unfortunate, because if we look at what happened in Sahih al-Bukhari, what happened in Sahih al-Bukhari, we authentically recorded, that a woman came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and said, with regards to her husband, I have no complaints about this man's religion. is religious, nor about his maintenance of me. He looks after me well, but I just can't stand him. I can't stand to look at him. When I see him in the midst of people, I find him to be the most detestable. This is what she felt in her heart. She could not stand to be with this man. It was threatening her religion because it made her bad in her character to her husband. In some narrations mention that she felt to spit in his face when he came to her. And of course this is evil. It's bad. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ asked her if she was prepared to give back what was given to her as mahar. That he asked her first what was given, and she informed him that it was an orchard. And he asked whether she was prepared to give it back. In some narrations it said that she said, I'll give back 2. And he said, no, just you give back what was given to you. And then he instructed her husband to facilitate the khula. Meaning that it's quite possible, and not to say this is the fact or this is the situation, but it's quite possible that she married him without seeing him. This was a mistake, and this created this problem. This is guidance to people from that perspective. Also, it's quite possible that there were things about him which were hidden. And we have cases recorded authentically where Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, a woman came to him and married him. And when she came and removed her clothing, he saw a spot on her back, discoloration in her skin. And he sent her back to her family. She was divorced. Because this was a physical defect which he wasn't informed about. So, hidden physical defects can be the basis of seeking divorce in Islam, if it was hidden at the time of marriage. So if a woman finds herself in a situation where the man did not inform her about certain things, she doesn't necessarily want to bring it to the public's notice, well, this happened, he's this and he is that. She can seek it through khula, and that avenue is there for her to terminate her marriage. The covering of women, again, tends to be one of the areas of focus against Islam. Evidence that Muslims oppress their women, that they must cover themselves. Whereas from an Islamic perspective, that covering is for the protection of women. It is for the protection of women. That women be protected, as Allah says in the Quran, يُدْنِينَ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ جَلَابِيبِهِنَّ لِيُعْرَفْنَ وَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ. That they should put their outer garments over themselves to be known and not harmed. That they be known in the society and not harmed. It is for their protection. In Western society, where women are exposed, they are under attack in a way unprecedented in history. In 1991, the statistics of rape in America, where you can buy sex without any problems. Extramarital relations are widespread. Yet, rape had reached the 100,000 mark. Over 100,000 people were reportedly raped in America in 1991. And they estimate that the actual numbers were 7 to 10 times that, because most rapes are not reported. This was an epidemic of rape. Women being molested in all of the workplaces, whether they joined the armies in great numbers. Women are being molested in the armies. You had the tail hook incident, etc. Women in the legal profession, in the medical profession, throughout, whatever fields they went into, they're being molested. And we should note that when we're talking about rapes in America, we're not talking about women raping men. You know, because of course this does exist. But those 100,000 didn't involve any women raping men, like maybe 1 or 2. Okay? So it is women who suffer. The rise in rape, you can see, can be charted. And you will find a correlation between that rise in rape and the unclothing of the Western female. At the turn of the century, Western females wore hijab. They were covered from head to toe. Even when they went swimming, they wore dresses swimming. This is the West. But from that time till now, their clothing has been systematically removed. Till now, some are, debating or arguing that they should be allowed to walk naked in the streets if they feel like it. And there is, as I said, a direct correlation between the unclothing of the female and the attacks against them. Islam clothes the female to protect her, because males biologically have been shown to be aroused far more quickly than females. Masters and Johnsons did extensive studies on male and female differences in their sexual habits and natures. And it's well documented. So, to protect the female, they are covered. And this hijab extends beyond the clothing itself to actually a separation, a general separation in society. That it discourages the mixing of males and females in gatherings, social gatherings, etc., etc., for the protection of the females. Although, to be fair, to some degree, this has been abused amongst males. Where, for example, in certain parts of the world, females are not allowed to go to mosques. The men will prevent females from going to the mosques, though Islam says otherwise. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, don't prevent your women from going to the mosques. Though their homes are better for them, don't prevent them from going to the mosques. But today, in certain parts of the world, women are not allowed to go to the mosque. We find also that education to large degrees were denied women in certain parts of the Muslim world, under the name of hijab. But again, Islam stresses education for both males and females. It is not limited to males, because females who will raise the next generation need to be educated both Islamically as well as academically. Muslim criminal law is another area in which Islam tends to be condemned. A person is stoned to death for adultery, their hands are cut off for stealing, these type of things. Even a murderer is executed in the West, which decided that they would no longer kill murderers. They then decided that everybody else who was killing those who killed were wrong. It is enough to point out that the main goal behind the application of Islamic law is deterrence. Is to discourage crime. And as such, the penalty is severe. It is a severe penalty. But the main goal is the discouragement of crime. And that penalty is not applied randomly. It must only be applied, or it should only be applied, where there is absolute evidence. In the West, a person may be convicted of murder based on forensic evidence. Forensic evidence which could be fabricated. In Islam, forensic evidence is not enough. The person may be jailed because the judge believes that it is likely that this person did it, but they cannot be executed. As the Prophet ﷺ had said, to drop the hudud lishubuhat, where there is doubt. Where any doubts arise, then the hudud are not to be applied. The hudud are those laws of executing taking the hand, cutting off the head, stoning to death. And when we look at the laws concerning adultery and fornication, very severe, especially in a society, Western society, where fornication is no longer considered to be a crime. Right? It is removed as a crime from the law books. Then for a country to be giving 100 lashes for somebody to fornicate, or stoning to them to death for adultery, it seems excessive, brutal. But we have to know from an Islamic perspective that this requires 4 witnesses who sees these people in the act. And how many cases of this occurs? Very few. So the severity of the law is there as a warning. Of course, in the case of women who give birth to a child, get pregnant, and they're not married, or their husband has been out of the country for 1 year and all of a sudden they're pregnant, that can be evidence in and of itself. Because from an Islamic perspective, the woman cannot claim a virgin birth. We recognize virgin birth only in the case of Jesus. So that is sufficient evidence for her to be punished. But as I said, in general, it remains as a deterrent in the society, and as such, it is severe. But even the cutting off the hands of the thief, there are requirements. The amount stolen is not just any amount. If the thing which was stolen was public property, it's not applied. If it was something out in the open, people are tempted, it's not applied. If it's in a time of famine or difficulty, it is not applied. If it is from your own boss, he's not giving you your wages, etc., it is not applied. There are many circumstances it's not applied. It's only really applied for the professional thief. The one who trains himself to pick your pocket, to break your safe, to break into your home. It is really to deal with professional crime. In closing, issue concerning terrorism, because this is a big issue today where terrorism is attributed to Islam. We should understand, one, that this is an extension from the crusading period, and it is a direct product of the activities of the PLO back in the 70s and early 80s, where airliners were being bombed, airports bombed, bombs going off indiscriminately, killing women and children, etc. That the PLO do not represent Islam. It should be very clear. The PLO do not represent Islam. There are Muslims amongst them, people with Muslim names, but there are also communists, and there are Christians. It is not limited to Muslims. It is not a Muslim organization in that sense. Islamic organization, no. So what it has done, what it did, its activities cannot be attributed back to Islam. Islam does not condone terrorism. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ made specific instructions with regards to jihad. That in the course of jihad, women and children, the old temples of the synagogues and the churches should not be destroyed, etc. There are specific rules given. Destroying orchards where people are going to eat food, etc. Destruction, just wanton destruction, is not permitted from an Islamic perspective. So terrorism should not be attributed to Islam. It is incorrect to do so. Muslims will fight. Islam does legitimize fighting in defense of the faith. This is something which Muslims should not feel shy about. People fight for all kinds of reasons. They fight in defense of their property. They fight in defense of their nation. Muslims fight in defense of the faith. So I'll just stop now, reminding the audience that we said from the very beginning that the misconceptions, the misunderstandings about Islam and Muslims can be attributed back to 2 basic sources. One, deliberate falsification of information about Islam and Muslims, which is a product of the Crusader hangover prevalent in the West, which controls the international media to a large degree. And so their attitudes spill over into the newspapers throughout the world. That means that we're talking about media distortion, but having its roots in the Crusader attitude of the past. And the other source, we said, also was of deliberate distortion, was that of the Orientalist traditions, where the centers of study for the Muslim religion, Muslim peoples developed amongst the missionaries for the purpose of attacking Islam, that deliberate distortions were made about Muslims in order to discredit them and in order to discredit the religion, to facilitate their colonization of Muslim lands. The other source, we said, was inadvertent, where people misinterpret Muslim practices, reasonably misinterpret them, or due to a lack of information about Muslims, and furthermore, due to the malpractice of Muslims. Misinformation due to what Muslims do, which goes against the principles of Islam, and then what they do is attributed to Islam. And we said for this, we really have to tell them that Islam is not what people do, what Muslims do, but what they should do. The reality is that Islam invites humankind to morality. The essence of Islamic teachings are moral teachings. Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, had said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was only sent to perfect for you the highest of moral character traits. That all of the pillars and principles of Islam invite the adherents to morality, to what is known to be righteous and good throughout this world. The essence of Islamic teachings are good moral principles. Principles with regards to human beings and God, with regards to human beings and other human beings, and even with regards to human beings and the society around them. Islam has very clear moral principles with regards to the conservation of nature and animals, etc. Very strong opinions with regards to it, based on the teachings of both the Quran and the Sunnah. So it is important for Muslims. It is their responsibility to clarify these misconceptions, which are common among non-Muslims throughout the world, to put in the forefront the essence of the Islamic teachings, which are moral teachings, seeking the moral good for human beings. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Now we would have the second part of today's session, that's the question and answer session. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Abu Amina Bilal Phillips, for your lucid and all-encompassing points presented on the topic of the day, Islam, the misunderstood religion. We are aware that Dr. Bilal has presented just a few of the many, many points he could have presented. Now we would begin the question and answer session. May I briefly outline the rules we expect to be observed during the question and answer session so that we could derive more benefit for all of us present here in the limited time we have at our disposal. Questions asked should be on the topic, Islam, the misunderstood religion only. Kindly state your question briefly and to the point. Only one question at a time may be put forward to the speaker. For your second question, you would have to line at the back of the queue again. 2 mics have been provided in the hall for the questions. One next to the stage on my right for the gents, The brothers may put forward their question there, and one we have in the center aisle at the back for the ladies. The sisters may put forward their question at that mic. You may speak into the mic and put forward your question only when the mic is handed to you by our mic handling assistants, and you should speak directly into the mic only. Written questions on slip papers, which would be provided to you by the volunteers, would be passed on through the volunteers to me on the stage. These questions would, of course, be given secondary preference if time permits, and we have further scope. Kindly state your name and profession before putting forward your question to get a more appropriate leveled answer from the speaker. We would allow only one question at a time on the mics, alternately, first the ladies, then the gents. May we have the first question from the sisters, please?
We as Dais would like to know which are the points you could not cover due to short of time.
Issues of child marriages, why Muslims abstain from alcohol, pork, etc. The issues of inheritance laws, which give twice to males what females receive. The two female witnesses, with regards to two female witnesses equal to one male witness. Muslim men allowed to marry non-Muslims, Muslim females are not allowed. The sects amongst Muslims, prohibition of gambling and interest in Islam, Islam's position with regards to democracy, issues concerning abortion, population control. These were the main ones which I was to have covered.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Javed Sheikh. I am government servant working in All India Radio. Dr. Phillips, we can understand if any non-Muslim misunderstood Islam due to lack of knowledge of Islam, or some, according to you, deliberately dissemination of false information about Islam. It's understood. We can understand that. But some Muslims misunderstood Islam due to not clear information regarding some aspect, just like hijab, divorce, or family planning, or interest, like these aspects. So due to that, some Muslim scholars, there is a difference of opinion among different Muslim scholars also, due to not clear or detailed information regarding some aspect. So some non-Muslims claims that we are not responsible for misunderstanding Islam, but Muslim scholars or Islam itself is responsible for misunderstanding Islam. How you will clarify this?
Well, where there are differences of opinion amongst the scholars, the press has the duty to find what is the majority opinion. At least if they go by the majority opinion, then we cannot blame them. But if they just go by the opinion which they want, because what happens, unfortunately, is that when issues arise, the press will seek out individuals who are known to have very controversial opinions, opinions which may go against the mass of Muslims. So they will seek these individuals out and bring out their opinions to create, it sells papers, because their goal is to sell papers. So there's this kind of, you could say, bad journalism on their part, that their intent is selling papers and not conveying factual information to the people. Because any religion, if you go around looking, you can find differences of opinions. And if you are to take a minority opinion, an opinion held by a very small group, then you will always find distorted understandings of the general picture of Islam. So we say to the press that you have a duty Just as when you are looking at your political issues, you know, and you're polling the people, you don't poll one side, one community, you poll all sides. So you get a picture, an image of what the community, and you look to see what does the majority of the community hold. Then this is what you should do.
Yes.
Not detail. We are not having detailed information about some aspect. That's the reason. So one can criticize that Islam is incomplete religion.
No, I mean the issue of difference of opinion, difference of legal opinion. One cannot argue on the basis of it that Islam is incomplete. No, the implementation of Islam will always remain incomplete for Muslims. There will always be a need for ijtihad, for reasoning, try to apply Islam in our times. There will always be, and in the future times, there will always be a need for ijtihad. So there, and where there is ijtihad, there will be differences of opinion. So this is something, a part of Islamic law, which is what gives it the flexibility that it has and gives it the applicability today, even though it was revealed 1,400 years ago. If you were to pick up any other legal system from 1,400 years ago, British law, American law, European law, you try to apply it today, it would be totally ludicrous, because it is based on so many principles which today are rejected by humankind. Whereas the principles of Islamic law are universal. 1,400 years ago, they're applicable right till today. And the factor of ijtihad, in that area of ijtihad, qiyas, to apply and to deal with new circumstances, that remains open. That door is not closed. So the application of Islam is not complete. But Islam itself, as the revealed religion, is complete.
Yes, sister, can we have a question?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah.
I'm Dhiren. I'm a student of Islamic Studies from St. Xavier's College. I would like you to please clarify the misconception about economically independent Muslim women in relation with the essential principles of Islam.
Economically independent Muslim women. Well, we can say that Islam established economic independence for Muslim women in the final revelation itself. With the laws concerning inheritance, property of women was confirmed. Even with regards to themselves, that their names were not changed at the time of marriage, to confirm their individuality. The fact that they get married doesn't mean automatically they're now included in the husband's family, so whatever was theirs now becomes the husband's. No. Islamic law confirms their right to inherit and to own property from 1,400 years ago. Very important, because the West, who tends to raise this specter of Muslim women being denied economic rights, only gave the right to voting and economic right to own property and to sign business contracts in the late 1800s to early 1900s. Whereas Islam gave that some 1,400 years ago. So Muslim women from the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had their own businesses. They worked those businesses. Though the general recommendation in terms of Islamic position with regards to women is that they be in the home, still, for those who have the means and have the desire to work outside the home, while taking care of their home needs, or if they have some other arrangements, they are permitted to do so. So Islam gives the woman the right to set up her own business, to run her own business, to own the property of that business, and to decide on how that business will be run and how the monies will be spent herself. If her husband allows her to work outside the home, what she earns is her own. If she agrees or decides to give some to her husband, this is sadaqah from her. This is not an obligation on her part.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Amir Ahmed. I retired from a business establishment recently. I keep reading in a lot of Urdu books where it is mentioned that if you are in trouble, like if I am involved in a court case, and there is a passage, a description in the book, that if you read so-and-so ayah so many times at certain period of the day or after certain salah, you might get help, either hidden help from Allah, or your decision may be changed in your favor. or a lot of things in life. Like if things are going against my wishes, some book says or some person says that you read so and so, they call it zikr and wazaif. Does this practice of reading a specific ayah at a specific time for a specific number of repetitions, does it really change the decision of Allah or the predestination? Is it a good practice to follow by a Muslim, or is it against the laws of Tawheed? Will you please explain?
The practice of using the names of Allah, you can find books on the 99 names of Allah, in which each name is given certain qualities. You say it so many times, as you said. You know, your wife can't have a baby, so you recite this name so many times. You blow it on water, you drink the water, you know, a variety of different things. And your prescriptions, you should fast for so many days before you say the names, and, you know, all kinds of things. This has no foundation in the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions. This is something which has been invented, where the names of Allah and other portions of the Quran have been turned into magical amulets, magical formulas, attributing to them things which Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not. And when we are to look at any kind of prescription of this type, where somebody says, do this so many times and do that so many times, we have to ask, where did this come from? If the person said, Rasulullah ﷺ taught it, you have to ask, is this in hadith? Can you show me this hadith? Give me the reference. So you confirm that it is in fact from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And if it's a doubtful practice, then you should confirm from somebody of knowledge whether this hadith, because if it's not in Sahih Bukhari or Muslim, whether the hadith itself is authentic. This is necessary, because if we are going to embark on any act of worship, and by reciting Allah's names, this is an act of worship, or portions of the Quran, these are acts of worship, we should have the sanction of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ on it. Because he did say, "Man ahdatha fi amrina ma laysa minhu fahuwa radd." Whoever brings anything new in the religion which was not a part of it, it is rejected by Allah. So if somebody says, well, you know, my sheikh saw it in a dream, well, you have to say, thank you, but no thanks. Because when Allah revealed the verse, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, today I have completed for you your religion. When that verse was revealed, Imam Malik said regarding it, whatever was not religion at that time can never be religion. Because a person who claims to bring something new in the religion is claiming either that verse is not correct, the religion is not complete, I still have this thing to bring, or that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ didn't know as well as we do today. I mean, these are all statements and concepts which we have to say, A'udhu Billah, it's far away from Islam. Because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was authentically reported to have said, "Ma taraktu shay'an yuqarribukum ila Allah illa wa amartukum bi." I have not left anything which will bring you closer to Allah except that I have commanded you to do it. So anybody who will try to bring these things, we have to reject them if they are not based on authentic traditions or hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yes, sister.
Good day, Dr. Bilal. Last year I graduated as a student of psychology. Basically what I wanted to ask was, there are so many cases of child abuse, sexual and otherwise. What does Islam do basically to protect that? For women, you're saying that hijab protects them against sexual abuse, against the eyes of men. Men are men, they are not animals. I think men should be able to look after what they feel. I mean, given that they have higher levels of arousal, etc. But what does Islam do to protect children against such things?
Well, your question has two aspects to it. One, child abuse. Of course, Islam is very strongly against it. If it is sexual abuse, where it involves sodomy or rape, then the Islamic law is quite severe, to the point of death. Islamic punishments for sexual abuse of children is very severe. On the other hand, in the case of women and males in terms of the hijab protecting women from males, it is not saying that men are animals, that they're all evil, but it is recognizing the nature of human beings. Men and women are attracted to each other by nature. And if a woman exposes more of her body, she will be more attracted to men. That is the nature. We're talking about sexual attraction because, for example, in the West, when my wife walks in Toronto or in New York wearing hijab, people will look at her. So Islam is not saying that she's covered so as no one will look at her. They will look at her. But the way in which they look at her is different from the way in which they are going to look at a woman in a bikini. There's two different looks. So what Islam says, it accepts that look the way a person would look at a nun, right? But not the look which is the sexual look. Because the consequence of that's what we have to look at. What is the consequence? The consequence is that females will be harmed because males are stronger than females. And if their desires are unfulfilled in a society which promotes its products through females, they want to sell a Corvette or a Maserati or some very powerful sports car. They don't bother to put the statistics about the sports car. It goes from 0 to 100 in 6 seconds or whatever. They will put a woman lying in a bikini on top of the car. I mean, what is the message here? What is the message? Where the society promotes the sale of its products through the use of the female body, this is stirring up these feelings in the male population. So when a man goes out and he buys his sports car, and he doesn't find a woman coming to lie on top of his car, he's saying, there's something wrong here. So this leads him to want to take it by force. So what Islam does in terms of hijab, it will address the media also. In the covering of the woman, it's also should address the media to prevent the exploitation of females in the sale of goods in the society. So it's not about, of course, I've met in the West, women who will argue she's wearing a micro mini skirt, and a halter top, virtually naked. She's saying, I am not putting on this clothes to attract men. I just like the fashion. But the point is, when she puts it on and she looks in the mirror, what does she say to herself? Oh, you're looking good. Looking good to who? Is it because she wants females to look at her? No. She is seeking the attraction of males. She may not seek what comes along with that attraction. Men want to touch her or whatever, these type of things. But that is the consequence. So Islam says, do not do that. Cover yourself for the protection of yourself.
Thank you.
Yes, brother.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
I'm
salam.
Dr. Sayyid Arif. I'm associated with Ahya Call and Guidance Center, located at Nepean Sea Road. My question is that Islam is said to be unique religion, but the Western media and the sectarianism among the Muslims have distorted the true image of Islam, confusing the Muslims and the non-Muslims alike. So kindly tell us what is the true image of Islam and how or where to find the true Islam from amongst the different images presented to us. Jazakallah khairan.
Well, in summary, I would say that the true image of Islam is found in the Quran and in the Sunnah. as it was understood by the early generations of righteous Muslims. This is where the true image of Islam lies in terms of the fundamental principles of Islam. And where Muslim scholars have maintained that tradition till today, the true image can be found amongst them. But the basis of Islam is revelation. And this is where we should seek the answers. Human reasoning has its place. It is not nullified in Islam, but it should never be given precedence over revelation. So where we have elements in the Muslim community who seek to explain Islam merely from a logical or intellectual point of view, which involves negating or rejecting portions of revelation, we have to know that this is a deviation, a misunderstanding of Islam. Because our declaration of faith, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, is a declaration of our acceptance of the Quran and the Sunnah as being the foundation for our lives. And of course, we say always that it is the Quran and Sunnah as understood by the early generations, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because people may still take the Quran and Sunnah and interpret it as they please. Whereas we do have that restriction because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, the best of generations is my generations. Khairun nasi qarni, thumma alladhina yalunahum, thumma alladhina yalunahum. He confirmed that those were the best of generations. So their understanding, being there at the time of revelation, is the best of understandings. And it should be given precedence over our own individual understandings till today.
Yes, sister.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. My name is Azra and I've just completed my graduation in microbiology. I would like to ask a question again regarding the Nikah Nama. Why do the women have to put a special clause in the Nikah Nama for asking permission for divorce and the men do not? Do they take women for granted that they have to give permission whether asked or not?
Okay, why does Islam automatically give men the right and women have to get it by request? Well, it is back again to the issues of the natures of males and females. That in society, from time immemorial, males have been making the decisions. It is their historical role to be the leaders of society. And this, God has created them with the tools for it. Not to say that women have nothing to contribute, but in terms of decision making, primary decision making, this has been the biological and sociological position of males historically. In terms of the decision for divorce, Islam looks at females as being more emotional, that state of being more emotional is not necessarily a negative state. It is a positive state for the rearing of children. That added emotion is very, very important. This is why you find in general women tend to be much more gentle and so with the children than the men. That there is a difference in those basic natures, and talking about in general. So the men being less emotional and less susceptible to biological changes which affect emotion. Because again, we go back to the PMS situation for women, which can affect their own decisions, other biological changes into menopause and these type of biological changes which their bodies go through, which do affect them psychologically. On the basis of these, as well as the qualities of leadership which Allah has put in general in men historically, that final decision initially is placed in the hands of the men. But the right of women with regards to it has not been neglected.
you.
Yes, brother.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Generally, most of us following Islam selectively. Whatever we understood, that also we are not following. Interest is haram.
Interest.
Interest is haram.
Yes.
Let us practice. Let us who are sitting in the hall, whatever interest they are having, forgive it. Give it. Start right now. This is a practical thing. That is the only thing. That's all.
Well, that's not really a question, but a statement which I would, of course, encourage with our brother's expression that all of us who are involved in interest, give it up. Give it up so that we will not face that sin, that major sin on the day of judgment. A sin so great that Allah and His Messenger have declared war on us. A sin so great that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ compared, saying that interest has over 70 branches, the simplest of which is equivalent to a man having sexual relations with his mother. I mean, putting an image in our minds that should cause us to think and to reject the interest systems which are being fostered on us from the colonial era to today. We have to make a change, and every Muslim who is capable of making that change, who doesn't make an effort to do so, will be held accountable before Allah on the day of judgment. Interest is a major sin in Islam.
Yes, sister.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. My question is concerning the divorce. Suppose a man, a Muslim man, he pronounces the first divorce to his wife, but he reconciles to her before the first monthly period. Then in that case, is the first divorce is complete?
If the man reconciles with his wife before the third period ends, you mentioned before the first period. It could be the first, the second, or the third. Really, the critical one is the third. Before the third period comes or ends, then that is considered a pronouncement of divorce, which is held in account. It is not considered a completed divorce, but a pronouncement, meaning that if he does it a second time, it becomes two pronouncements. But if he does it a third time, he cannot take his wife back without her marrying someone else in a legitimate marriage, not a marriage of convenience, but in a legitimate marriage, and is widowed or divorced.
Jazakallah, sir.
Yes, brother.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Rizwan and I am into software programming in computers. Since the topic is misunderstanding in Islam, I would like you to ask whether if someone says that the misconceptions regarding Islam will reduce to almost zero level when there is an actual Khilafat system, or in other words, victory and establishment, as was read in the beginning of the program, that you will see people coming in the fold of Islam when Allah gives you Nusrat and victory. The thing is, what is your opinion about this Nusrat and how can it be achieved in the correct, in this correct global Islamic status, so that these misunderstandings can be removed to its maximum level?